The little girl's voice cut through the roaring airport like a single note in a silent church. "Are you lost too?" The question was so soft, so innocent, that no one else seemed to hear it over the rolling suitcases, flight announcements, and hurried footsteps. But the man she asked heard it as if the entire world had stopped. He looked down from behind his expensive sunglasses and tailored navy suit, expecting to see a parent nearby, maybe someone rushing over in embarrassment. Instead, he found a pair of wide brown eyes staring up at him without fear, without judgment, only curiosity. "Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen in ordinary places, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness Journal." Stories like this remind us that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. It was late morning, and sunlight poured through the enormous glass walls of the international terminal, painting everything in gold. Private jets waited in the distance like silent trophies. Travelers hurried past with urgency, their lives measured in departure times and boarding zones. In the middle of all that movement stood Victor Hale, a man whose name was etched onto skyscrapers and hospital wings. A self-made millionaire. A financial genius. A man who had everything money could buy. And yet he had never felt more lost. Victor had arrived 3 hours early for his flight, not because he was punctual, but because he didn't want to be at home. The house was too big, too quiet. It echoed with absence. His wife had passed away 2 years earlier after a sudden illness, and his son, Adrian, had left for college shortly after, carrying grief like a heavy suitcase neither of them knew how to unpack. Their phone calls had become shorter over time. Their conversations careful and brittle. Victor had buried himself in work, building new companies, closing massive deals, attending conferences in cities that blurred together. Success was the only language he still spoke fluently. But success did not hold your hand in the middle of the night. He had just ended a tense phone call with his assistant, irritated about a delayed contract, when the little girl appeared in front of him. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7. Her hair was tied in 2 slightly uneven braids, and she wore a yellow dress patterned with tiny blue flowers. One of her shoes blinked with every step. "Are you lost too?" she repeated. Victor blinked, unsure how to respond. "Excuse me?" "You look like it," she said matter-of-factly. "My grandma says people who stare at the floor like that are either thinking too much or they're lost." He almost smiled. "Almost. I'm not lost," he said gently. "I'm just waiting for my flight." She nodded, as if considering this carefully. "Me too. But sometimes people can be waiting and still be lost." The words landed heavier than she intended. Victor felt something twist in his chest. He removed his sunglasses, and for the first time that morning, he truly looked at someone instead of past them. "Where are your parents?" he asked, scanning the crowd. "My mom is getting coffee," the girl replied calmly. "She told me to stay right here by the big window. I'm not supposed to talk to strangers." She paused. "But you don't feel like a stranger." Victor swallowed. He didn't know why that unsettled him. Her name, he would soon learn, was Amara Quinn. She was traveling with her mother to visit a children's hospital in another state. Amara had been receiving treatment there for a rare heart condition since she was 4. The surgeries, the medications, the constant monitoring, it was a world of white walls and beeping machines that no child should know so intimately. Yet there was no fear in her posture. No bitterness in her eyes. Just light. Victor noticed the small hospital bracelet still circling her wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve. He felt a strange, uncomfortable awareness. He had funded entire pediatric wings. He had donated millions to medical research. His name hung in polished metal letters in hospital lobbies. But he had never really seen the children whose lives existed beneath those letters. "Are you scared?" he heard himself ask. "Of flying?" Amara tilted her head. "No. I like flying. It feels like you're closer to heaven. The sentence hit him harder than any business loss ever had. Why would you say that? She shrugged. When you're sick a lot, people talk about heaven like it's a backup plan. But I think it's more like a promise. Not something to rush to. Just something that makes you brave. Victor had built empires from logic and strategy. He negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. But standing in front of this child, he felt defenseless. Amara sat down on the empty seat beside him and swung her legs. My mom says we're going to meet a new doctor this time. She says he's the best. Do you think the best people ever feel lost? Victor didn't answer right away. He thought of his silent house. Of his son's unread messages. Of the way he avoided looking at family photos because they made his throat tighten. Yes, he finally admitted. I think they do. She nodded as if this confirmed something important. That's okay. My teacher says being lost just means you haven't found your map yet. Her words were simple. Childlike. But they peeled back something Victor had sealed shut. For years, he had believed strength meant control. That vulnerability was weakness. When his wife had grown sick, he had thrown money at the problem. The best specialists. The most advanced treatments. Private rooms. But there had been moments in those hospital corridors when she simply wanted him to sit beside her and hold her hand. To stop answering emails. To stop planning. To just be present. He had failed at that. Amara leaned closer to the window, watching planes taxi across the runway under the bright blue sky. Do you have kids? She asked. Yes, Victor replied quietly. A son. Does he think you're the best? The question stole his breath. I don't know, he whispered. Before Amara could respond, a woman approached quickly, her face pale with concern. She looked to be in her early 30s, her clothes neat but worn with exhaustion. Amara, sweetheart, I told you to stay close, she said gently, though relief softened her voice. I did, Mom, Amara replied cheerfully. I made a friend. He's waiting and maybe a little lost. The woman offered Victor an apologetic smile. I'm so sorry if she bothered you. She didn't, he said, meaning it more than she could know. They introduced themselves briefly. The mother's name was Celine Quinn. She carried herself with quiet resilience, the kind born from too many nights sleeping in hospital chairs. There were faint shadows under her eyes, but when she looked at her daughter, her entire face transformed. Boarding for their flight was announced. As they gathered their things, Amara turned back to Victor. I hope you find your map, she said. He watched them walk toward the gate, her small hand tucked into her mother's. Something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like boarding his plane to another city full of meetings and contracts. He felt an urgent, unfamiliar pull. His assistant would call it irrational. His colleagues would call it irresponsible. But Victor suddenly understood something that had eluded him through all his success. Life was not measured in acquisitions. It was measured in moments. Without fully thinking it through, he walked to the ticket counter. Within minutes, he had cancelled his original flight and booked a seat on the same plane as Amara and her mother. He told himself it was coincidence. Curiosity. A passing impulse. But deep down, he knew it was something else. The flight was filled with daylight and soft clouds drifting beneath them like folded cotton. Victor sat a few rows behind Amara and Celine, watching as the little girl pressed her forehead to the window, completely mesmerized. There was no trace of fear in her. Only wonder. He realized he had not felt wonder in years. At the hospital in the next state, reality returned in sterile white. Machines hummed. Nurses moved with efficiency. Victor lingered awkwardly in the lobby, unsure why he had followed through. But when he saw Amara being wheeled down a hallway for tests, she waved at him as if he belonged there. That simple gesture rooted him in place. He approached the reception desk and quietly asked about the pediatric cardiac unit. When the nurse mentioned funding challenges and outdated equipment, something ignited inside him, not the cold ambition of profit, but something warmer. Purpose. Over the next few days, Victor did something he had never done before. He stayed. Not in a luxury hotel across town, but in the hospital waiting room beside Celine during Amara's procedures. He listened as Celine spoke about the fear of losing her only child. About working 2 jobs between treatments. About praying in silence at night because she was too tired to cry anymore. Victor listened without offering solutions. Without promising money. He simply listened. And when Amara came out of surgery days later, pale but smiling, she reached for his hand first. "You found your map yet?" she asked weakly. He squeezed her tiny fingers gently. "I think I just did." In the weeks that followed, Victor postponed deals. Delegated responsibilities. He began a complete renovation and expansion of the pediatric cardiac wing, not with a press conference or a public announcement, but quietly. He removed his name from the building plans. He wanted the focus to be on the children, not on him. But the greatest change did not happen in boardrooms or construction sites. It happened one evening when he finally called his son. The conversation was awkward at first. Stiff. But Victor did something new. He apologized. Not with grand gestures or expensive gifts, but with honesty. He admitted he had been absent. That he had mistaken providing for loving. That he was still learning how to be a father without hiding behind success. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Adrian's voice cracked. "I've been lost too, Dad." That night, Victor cried for the first time in years. Not from grief. But from release. Months later, on a bright morning filled with sunlight, the newly renovated pediatric wing opened quietly. The walls were painted with murals of clouds and open skies. Each room had large windows. A small plaque near the entrance read, "For the brave hearts who teach us how to live." Amara walked through those halls with steady steps, her health improving beyond expectations. She no longer wore a hospital bracelet. She wore a bracelet of tiny silver wings instead. On the day Victor visited for the final inspection, she ran toward him carefully, mindful of her healing body, and wrapped her arms around his waist. "You don't look lost anymore," she declared. He looked around at the children laughing in the playroom, at Celine speaking with nurses without fear in her eyes, at his son standing nearby after choosing to intern with the hospital's foundation. "No," he said softly. "I'm not. Sometimes the people who save us are the ones we least expect. Sometimes a child with a fragile heart can mend one that has been emotionally broken for years. And sometimes being lost is not the end of the story, it is the beginning of finding what truly matters." If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps spread stories of kindness and reminds others that hope still exists in the world. And before you go, comment the word map if you believe that even in our loneliest moments, we can still find our way back. Because on an ordinary, sunlit day at an airport, a little girl asked a lonely millionaire a simple question. And in answering her, he found his way home.